So back to one of our top stories now. Biden administration said to be flying thousands of underage migrants into the state of New York and elsewhere. New York Post reports about 2,000 have been flown from Texas into the state since August, then transferred to buses to different parts of the state. I want to bring in Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz to talk about this. And Senator, good morning to you. You've got something you're proposing today I'll get to in a moment here. But Governor Ron DeSantis, apparently there was a flight into Tallahassee as well a month or two ago. His statement said if the administration is so confident the open border policy is good for the country, then why the secrecy? I ask you to answer that because some of these flights are landing literally in the dead of night, Senator.
Well, their entire political strategy is based on secrecy. What is happening at our southern border is an absolute tragedy. We've had over 1.3 million people cross illegally. We're on a path to have over 2 million people cross. And Joe Biden and Kamala Harris caused this, and their entire strategy is ignore it, and they're counting on the corrupt corporate media to ignore it as well. So of course they fly in the middle of the night because they have no defense. Every Democrat who for 4 years said kids in cages, the Biden cages are bigger and they're more full than we have ever had in this country, and not a single Democrat cares. It is an absolute disaster. And I got to tell you, my home state of Texas is bearing the brunt of this catastrophe that is unfolding because of political decisions made by Joe Biden and made by Kamala Harris.
Senator, one of the problems here is that the Flores Agreement basically says that children, that unaccompanied minors, cannot be held for longer than 30 days. So then the administration is under the responsibility. They have to then find either a family member or a U.S. sponsor that can take care of them. I mean, at some point, is there something in the law that can change, or are we just going to be under this situation as more and more unaccompanied minors keep coming across?
So there absolutely is something in the law that could change. I introduced legislation that would expedite review for people who came here, that would keep families together, so you wouldn't separate families, but it wouldn't do catch and release. It wouldn't release them. Instead, it would provide for 500 new immigration judges who would immediately adjudicate asylum claims. That's the way the rule of law is meant to work.
Right.
And even more fundamentally, we know how to solve this problem, which was the Remain in Mexico agreement. That's what President Trump negotiated with the government of Mexico. Last year, we had the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. It worked. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris ripped it to shreds, and they produced this disaster, and they have no answer. And I got to say, you know, you see rich Democrats basically saying to Texas and the rest of the country, oh, you silly people, you shouldn't worry about this. And they say this while they're at their fancy enclaves, while they're whining and dining. Well, I've introduced legislation today in the Senate. It's called the Stop the Surge Act, and it creates new ports of entry for these 2 million illegal immigrants. So instead of having 15,000 Haitians under a bridge in Del Rio, Texas, Del Rio just has 35,000 people, its population. That's half the city coming in one day in Del Rio. Well, what my bill does is it designates new ports of entry, like Palo Alto, California, like St. Helena, California, like Yountsville, California, like Greenwich, Connecticut, like Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, like Cambridge, Massachusetts, Martha's Vineyard, Block Island, Rhode Island, Governor's Island, Scarsdale, New York, North Hero, Vermont, and Nantucket. So rich Democrats can be sitting there and suddenly see 10, 20, 30, 50,000 illegal immigrants like we're seeing in Texas on a daily basis. And I can just envision them in Nantucket sipping a martini going, oh, goodness, they want to come to our clubs. They would be horrified, but they need to face the disaster of their policies and the humanitarian misery they're causing.
To quote you, if Washington Democrats would endure a fraction of the suffering of South Texas, the laws would be enforced, the wall would be built, and the Remain in Mexico policy would be re-implemented. You introduced it today. Does it go anywhere?
Look, the Democrats aren't going to move it because they're perfectly happy being hypocrites. These are the same people who, at President Obama's birthday party, take off their masks and party like it's 1999. These are the same people who, Joe Biden, when he goes out to dinner in Washington, D.C., he and Jill don't wear masks. These are the same people, Nancy Pelosi, when she does fancy fundraisers with rich Democrats, they don't wear masks. They make the serving staff wear masks, and that's really how they treat much of America, like their serving staff. You know, it is Joe Biden needs to come to the southern border and see it firsthand. Kamala Harris, our border czar, come to the Rio Grande Valley. You know, Bill Dana, a few weeks ago, I did roundtables in South Texas with ranchers and farmers and sheriffs and law enforcement and elected officials. Virtually all of the elected officials in South Texas are Democrat. Historically, it's been a Democratic part of the state. Almost to a person, the elected Democrats looked at me and said, listen, if my party is for open borders, I can't be with them. Nobody can defend this disaster if they see it, which goes back to your opening question, Bill. Why do they do it in the middle of the night? Because they can't defend it, and their only strategy is hide it from the American people.
Senator, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Great to have you.
Thank you.
And a Prince reference. I mean, amazing.